So Duleek, your first time in Amsterdam?
Yeah. I've never been after all this time. Yeah.
Yes, because you live in the UK.
Yeah.
And you're here for the first time.
Yeah.
Yes. And you were here because of Inspire to Live, the conference. So it's also your first time at Inspire to Live, I guess?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So what made you join Inspire to Live?
I met Peter maybe a year ago, and he said he was looking for more diagnostic tests that can help guide treatments because the trend has always been make more drugs, make new drugs for cancer patients, but the thing that's unaddressed is how do you get the right drugs to patients. And it looked like Inspire to Live, they actually wanted to focus on that problem as well, which is very meaningful.
Yeah, because that's your field.
Yes.
Yeah, so what exactly is it what you do?
So we have an organ-on-a-chip company. We take patient tumor samples. We test different treatments outside of their body, the patient's body, and we run this quick 1-week test that's comparing different treatment options so that at the end of this test, you can figure out if a certain treatment is more likely to work for that specific person.
Already after a week?
Yeah, so it's a very quick test.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what makes you do this kind of testing? What's your background in this area?
So I come from more of the scientific background, nanoengineering and medical statistics, worked in pharma as well as software before, and generally saw that as more drugs become approved for treating cancer, the question remains of how to get that right drug to that each patient.
Yeah. Have you been in cancer for a long time?
7 years. Yeah.
Okay. So, and what is in that field, just for my curiosity, the most, let's say, remarkable result you've seen so far?
Well, I think in terms of the drugs that are available, the amount of treatment options has just increased so much. The FDA now approves over 50 cancer drugs a year. So immunotherapies, new ways of targeting cancer, combinations of drugs. So I think the toolkit has become huge.
Yes, 50 a year.
Yeah.
New medications, new treatments.
Yeah.
That's massive.
Mm-hmm.
And is it that when you test them all next to one another, or just a few?
So we test a few. So on any given cancer, we're dealing with a few drugs that are approved. So a lot of the cancers we work on, there's multiple options at the same point in care. And so the question is when to use that, one of the approved options. A good example is kidney cancer, where patients, if they have metastatic kidney cancer, they have 4 treatment options on the very first treatment. So the question is, which of these 4 options is better? Because sometimes you can get a better response to one drug over the other.
Right. And just what I sometimes hear is that it really depends on the person. Is that the case?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, like in kidney cancer, right, 10 to 16% of people can have a complete response even when they're late stage. Which means that they can end up being cured, which is something that wasn't really possible 10 years ago. But because only 10 to 16% of these people have a complete response, it's very kind of unique. Not everyone is going to get that kind of really powerful response. And so figuring out which of those patients are going to respond differently is very important.
Yes, I understand. Because you say it's out-of-body testing, right?
Yes.
But that is, so you take a sample of the tumor, take it into the laboratory and do the testing. Yeah. And you can actually predict what will be the result of the different treatments.
Exactly, yeah.
That seems very important. Mm-hmm. Yes. And Peter asked you to join Inspire to Live because of your background.
Yeah, that's right. Because of the bigger focus on now diagnostic testing in cancer treatment.
Yes. And what made you decide to actually spend time on this, invest time in this? Because it's your work, right? What you do.
I mean, it's a combination of personal and professional, right? So professional because I've worked in this field for a while now, but personal also because I've had family who have had cancer before. So I think it made a lot of sense using the skill set to apply to a problem.
Yeah, because normally, professional-wise, what do you use your results for? Is that for pharmaceutical companies or for hospitals?
So we've actually gone to both groups, right? So with the hospitals, there's multiple approved treatment options. So we work a lot in cancers where there's a tough choice to be made in treatment, and the clinician and the patient can directly benefit from that. But of course, with pharma companies, just because we have lots of new drugs available doesn't mean that there can't be better drugs made. A lot of cancers still lack really good treatment options. And so helping pharma companies get their drugs to patients is important to us as well.
Yeah. So, and when you say we, is that a whole team that works on this?
Exactly. So yeah, right now 19 of us.
All right. So, and this is back in the UK?
Yes.
Right. And you're from Canada originally, you say?
Yeah, that's right.
So why did you come to the UK?
Yeah, I mean, I was spent most of my life in Canada, moved to the U.S. to work, and when starting this company, we actually had an offer from an investor in the UK to see what the what it would be like to build in the UK, and I moved in 2019 to the UK. Found that the access to patient samples data, first in human studies, was really good in the UK. So I actually decided to stay there because it was a good place to do the R&D.
Yeah. So that's in London where you work. Yeah. Okay, good. So now you are here at the conference, first time in Amsterdam. So just as a sidestep, what's Amsterdam like to you?
It's a very nice walkable city, right? I mean, yeah, you can go everywhere on foot. I like the canals, lots of nice architecture. Yeah. So it's nice to visit.
Regarding the conference, you're here now for the second day. So if you look back, are there any remarkable moments for you up to now?
Yeah, I think some of the talks on how patients view drug safety is very important because I think, being in this industry, you care a lot about improving responses, getting better outcomes that way. But sometimes you forget like how unsafe some drugs are, or how sometimes you go for these approaches where you just add drugs together, put them in combination, but they can be quite toxic. And so hearing the patient's perspective on it, hearing some of the talks about how toxicity of drugs, the unsafeness of drugs goes underreported by patients, that's, I think, very interesting because you don't hear that perspective a lot.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. Because is that also not part of your job?
So we do more drug efficacy testing, right? Yes. So we don't do as much in the safety testing, but of course we wouldn't want to prescribe unsafe drugs. And so there's always this complex decision where we try to see what drugs are more effective. And if the patient then is concerned about how toxic that drug is, they need to have that choice of saying that, picking between drugs that are not just effective, but also safe.
I understand, yes. And that's not always obvious for you, is it? When you test on effectiveness, because you just don't know in the long term what it's going to be doing.
Yeah, so we know in terms of effectiveness how good each drug is on a given patient. We know what the reported results are in terms of safety, right? But there's always going to be slightly different reactions on that front as well for patients. And so there's always an element of choice, which also means you need to have a lot of communication between each party.
I hear, because that makes me wonder, because here you meet patients, you hear patients talk about safety for, medications, and that's to you interesting to know. Is it that in your work it's morely like really scientific, testing the effectiveness and not so much involved with patients? Is that what your daily practice is about?
Yeah, I mean, the daily work is a lot about testing effectiveness of drugs, right? So we sometimes don't get to spend enough time on safety.
No patients involved as well.
So we do actually involve patients. So that's something that we've done, and especially done over the last year. So for example, we actually had 120 breast cancer patients reach out to us over the last few weeks to do interviews. We do a lot of one-on-one interviews, finding out what their journey is like. And sometimes we even hear about not just what drugs they like and dislike in terms of effectiveness, but also some of the complaints that they've had about safety. So one of the breast cancer drugs that we test that's quite effective on some patients, we had one patient say how they actually offered that drug, they outright refused because of the safety concerns of that drug. So we actually try to talk to a lot more patients, and more frequently we do that more often now as well.
Yeah, it seems very valuable to have that perspective as well. So that's also what you see here as being very valuable.
Yeah, exactly, to talk to the patients and the patient advocates.
Yeah, nice. Is there anything you're looking forward to in this conference? Because there's another day to come and this evening.
Yeah, I mean, I think just more learning from the patient's perspective, because I would say that I spend the minority time from the patient's perspective and the majority from the oncologist or pharmaceutical perspective, right? So getting more exposure to that is very helpful.
Yeah, because there's patients here as well. Yeah. And you speak with them also on a sort of off-the-record base?
Exactly.
Because you do a lot of things as well, right? You go on different trips, I heard.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a good opportunity for that kind of off-the-record discussion, because oftentimes when we talk to patients it's in an interview, right? So it feels a bit more formal. But here, this is very informal, so you find new things doing it this way.
Yeah. You just mentioned that in your family also there was some occurrence of cancer, unfortunately. Knowing what you know now, looking back, would have there been any possibility of better treatments for them those days?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, especially, for example, in breast cancer and a lot of other tumor types, in the last 10 years, the options weren't great either, right? And now the options are a lot better. So I think if it happened now, the options would have been really huge. So in breast cancer, for example, we work specifically in a type called triple negative breast cancer. So the other types of breast cancer, they've had better treatments approved for over, 2 decades actually.
Triple negative is the most,
It's the most
severe one, huh?
aggressive,
Yeah.
Triple negative breast cancer is the hardest to treat. It has the worst survival rate. So in late stages, you only have 13 months of overall survival. Triple negative breast cancer, though, in just the last 3 years, you've had multiple drugs now approved for it. So now there's an actual element of choice. There's an element of options, right? So I think now...
Be actually cured.
Yeah, so even like in some of these trials, the cure rate is going up, right? So it's still low in triple negative breast cancer in the late stages, right? It's around 2%. But in the early stages, it's gotten a lot better. So it used to be around 30% complete response, but now it's going to 60% complete response. And patients who have a complete response, their chance of death goes down by 80% in the next 5 years.
Yeah, that's a wonderful result.
Yeah, so the early stage results have gone really good, and the late stage results are getting better now too.
Yeah, which is really good news for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, yes. Is there anything you would like to add, just that people who are watching this would like to know about?
I mean, I think generally speaking, like the future of personalized cancer treatment is very important, right? Because it's not one size fits all. That's what this conference everyone's talking about. It's not one size fits all. So it's a matter of patient involvement, oncologist involvement, but also both diagnostics and drugs being there to make that personalized treatment possible. So
it's a complex of all these factors that actually define how effective the medicine will be.
Yeah, and so I think everyone just needs to work on that whole ecosystem of making that possible.
Mm-hmm. And looking at that, is there anything to say about when you are affected by cancer? Is there anything that you could do personally to improve your chances of curing?
I think just doing a lot of research, and people here have been talking about good and bad research, but doing research. I know in the, for example, breast cancer community, a lot of patients talk to each other, and so I think the involvement of patient advocates and just asking oncologists for more information is something that actually in the patients that we've talked to, they've found to be very beneficial. It's just asking for more information, really pushing for information, because when you push for information, sometimes things that might not have been possible or that you might not have gotten become possible just because you asked for it, right?
That sounds pretty obscure.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of generic, but what we've experienced by talking to patients is asking for more tests, asking for more information about what treatments are available, sometimes opens up a discussion that leads to a treatment pathway that wasn't initially planned for them.
And is it that the doctor hasn't thought of that at all or just didn't want to mention it?
I think it just depends on the case. Like sometimes people get put into a bucket of other patients based on past experience, but there are sometimes unique things about that patient's case that aren't being considered. And when that discussion opens up, sometimes you get an extra test that wasn't planned, and that extra test leads to another treatment or another treatment plan, right? So we see that in, for example, genetic tests, right, where people in breast cancer go for request a BRCA test, which is not standard in some countries, but the positive BRCA test leads to treatment with a targeted drug, olaparib, which can then get potentially better responses, right? So sometimes not every test is standard, and just talking about and asking for it can lead to that non-standard test being applied, which then leads to a better drug.
Because it brings new possibilities, new opportunities, new things that you didn't think about, and it gives actually way to new ways to approach it. Anyway, so general advice would be ask
for more information, ask for tests.
Yes, and persist on doing research and try new things, right? Yeah. Because would it be possible that people are more cured then that the doctor would say instantly?
Sorry, what do you mean?
Well, would it be possible that people, although they hear it's not possible to treat anything, that if they would ask and if they would do more research, that they would find new ways that still you could be cured or it could be treated?
Exactly. I mean, because there's drugs that people can prescribe more of that might require a test. There are clinical trials that sometimes leads to better responses, right? So I mean, one of the patients that we have talked to with triple negative breast cancer, diagnosed late stage, because she asked for an extra test, she got enrolled into a clinical trial where she was positive for a biomarker, got a targeted drug, and she's alive 5 years later, which is very rare in late triple negative breast cancer, where survival is usually 13 months. We actually talked to one patient who also joined a clinical trial of a drug that's actually not approved and never got approved, but she happened to have a 5-year survival with that drug. So.
And is it that she persisted to get that drug?
Yeah, as she got into the clinical trial. Now, that drug actually never got approved, where at a patient population level, the drug wasn't effective enough on all the patients, but she had such a magnificent response to it that she's alive 5 years later as well, right?
So anyway, she was extremely lucky, but also by opening up and just pushing for something new, right?
Yeah, because there's so many clinical trials that are going on. Sometimes you don't know necessarily what's going to benefit. Like in triple negative breast cancer, there's so many drugs in clinical trials that if you don't know about it and if you don't ask, even the doctor might not know about a certain clinical trial just because there's hundreds of clinical trials out there, right?
We should have a sort of like overview of what's going on, right, in terms of clinical trials. Because it could help, it could save your life.
Yeah.
That's a good advice for anybody watching and having to deal with this themselves. Yeah. Thank you so much for this openness and transparency in your work. Very interesting.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Nice to.
That was it.